Hi. I noticed the envelope the moment I walked in from work. Thick, white, unnervingly formal, sitting square in the center of the kitchen island. She stood beside it, waiting. The whole scene was staged. The counters gleamed as though she'd wiped them down seconds before. A mug of tea sat untouched beside her hand. And her expression, pleasant but tightly wound, didn't match the casual yoga pants and oversized sweater she wore. Something in me braced before I even set my keys down. "You're home early," she said lightly. "Got out of the meeting sooner than expected." I hung my jacket. "What's this?" She gestured to the envelope with an almost rehearsed casualness. "Just something I've been working on with my empowerment circle. An idea. I think it could really help us." I pulled the document free, fanning the pages open. Respect and Autonomy Agreement. The title hit like a quiet punch. I scanned the first page, then the second, my pulse slowing, but my mind shifting into overdrive. Clause after clause, dense, precise, and cold beneath their polished language. No questioning late nights spent at independent personal growth activities. Full support required for friendships formed through empowerment work. No access to phone records, texts, or locations, such inquiries labeled violations of trust. Monitoring finances without mutual discussion. Grounds for relational misconduct. And beneath it all, the unmistakable undercurrent: don't ask questions. I flicked through the pages slowly, controlling my breath. "You had this drawn up?" She gave a careful smile. "Some of the women in my group are doing it. It's really progressive. About mutual respect and freedom." The last words sat heavy in the air. I met her eyes. For a brief second, something flickered behind them. Not excitement, not hope. Nerves. Anticipation. That was when I knew this wasn't about strengthening us. It was a smokescreen. A legal decoy for something already in motion. I set the packet down with deliberate calm. "It's an interesting approach." She stepped forward, placing a hand over mine. "I'd really like you to sign. It's important to me." The softness of her touch didn't match the iron beneath her words. For years, I trusted this woman with everything I had. We'd fought through layoffs, long-distance stretches, family illnesses. We'd sat on that very couch after my father passed, clinging to each other like survivors in a storm. And now she wanted a contract to dictate what questions I could ask? I smiled faintly, masking the cold surge rising beneath my ribs. "I'll need to read it more carefully." Her shoulders dropped a fraction. Disappointment, or calculation, hard to say. "No rush," she said too brightly. "But it would mean so much." I nodded, kissed her cheek, her skin cool against my lips, and walked toward the hallway with the folder under my arm. Upstairs, in my office, I read every line again, 3 times. By the third pass, my suspicions were no longer suspicions. They were certainties waiting to be proven. The clauses weren't about modern love or boundaries. They were legal positioning, built to preempt scrutiny, to create court-friendly narratives, to portray any monitoring, the very thing any betrayed spouse would instinctively do, as controlling or inappropriate. She was hiding something, or someone, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, that night, I sat beside her on the couch as she scrolled her phone, face down between glances, a new habit, and talked about her upcoming empowerment retreat. I played normal. I asked warm questions, I kissed her goodnight. And when the lights were off, and her breath slowed beside me, my eyes stayed open long into the early morning. The woman I loved was slipping behind a mask of legalese and false progressivism. But if she thought she'd scripted the next chapter of our marriage, she'd miscalculated. I wasn't signing her contract. I was about to start writing my own rules. In the days that followed, life resumed its outward rhythm. On the surface, we made dinner together, talked about the upcoming block party, laughed at a rerun of a sitcom we'd seen a dozen times. I played my part seamlessly. But beneath the smiles, a widening crack had formed. It began with her nights out. "I'll be late tonight. We've got a special empowerment circle session," she told me one Thursday, brushing on lipstick in the mirror. I leaned against the doorway, watching. "Another one? That's 3 this week." She smiled too brightly. "We're doing more intensive work. It's so freeing." I nodded casually. "Of course. Have a good time." Her relief was palpable. She left quickly, the faintest scent of her perfume lingering behind. That night, I noticed the change. Her phone stayed face down on the table. Notifications buzzed steadily, screen lighting up in brief bursts of color, text, another text. When she returned near midnight, she tiptoed upstairs, thinking I was asleep. I watched from the shadows of the hallway. Her movements were careful, calculated. She placed her purse on the far side of the dresser. Her phone disappeared into the bathroom with her, door clicking shut. By morning, everything was back to normal. Cheerful texts about weekend brunch. A peck on the cheek before heading to yoga. But the veneer was cracking. I began noticing a new name cropping up casually, Evan. "Oh, Evan had the funniest story last night," she said over coffee one morning. I looked up from my paper. "Evan?" She waved a hand breezily. "One of the guys from the group. Totally harmless. Just a great energy. Harmless." I filed the name away. The next anomaly surfaced a week later. I was balancing the household finances, something I'd done since we married. In the bank statements, a line item caught my eye, a charge from the Ivy Room Hotel, $312.78. Date, last Saturday. I frowned. Saturday, she had been at a healing retreat. A full-day event, she claimed, no overnight. I opened the hotel website. Boutique suites. Romantic getaway packages. Not exactly the site for a group healing workshop. I printed the statement quietly and filed it away. The following evening, during dinner, I steered the conversation lightly. "How was that retreat on Saturday?" She smiled, eyes bright. "Really powerful. Lots of journaling. Exhausting but so worth it." "Smooth. Too smooth." I smiled back, feeling the steady tightening beneath my ribs. By now, the pattern was undeniable. The contract had been a shield. The late nights, the sudden secrecy, the financial discrepancies, they weren't isolated. They were threads of the same web. But I didn't confront. Not yet. Instead, I adapted. I bought a small notebook and began tracking dates, times, discrepancies, names. Evan appeared more frequently, in offhand mentions, in text previews I glimpsed when her phone lit up briefly. I also began observing her new language. She spoke often of modern relationships, sovereignty, personal truth, concepts seeded, no doubt, by this empowerment circle, but now weaponized. And beneath it all, an unspoken tension pulsed between us. We still had dinners. She still kissed my cheek, but her eyes flickered away more often. Her hugs felt lighter, more performative. The mask was wearing thin. The hardest moments came during false normalcy, the quiet Sunday afternoons, curled together on the couch as if nothing had changed. I'd glance at her and remember weekend trips we'd taken, long walks through the city, hands entwined. And now, sitting inches apart, a canyon of silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken questions. I wanted to believe she was innocent. A part of me clung to that. That this was just a phase, bad advice, misguided friends. But another part, colder, sharper, knew better. The signs were multiplying, the mask slipping, and behind it, something was moving that could tear everything apart. So I did what she didn't expect. I smiled more. I agreed with her empowerment talks. I asked warm questions about her circle. I played the supportive, understanding husband, and all the while I tracked, listened, prepared, because the time for truth was coming. And when it arrived, I intended to be ready. By mid-month, the notebook in my desk drawer was growing fat with entries. I tracked everything now, her outings, timestamps of texts, unexplained expenses. The pattern wasn't just suggestive anymore. It was undeniable. But suspicion wasn't proof. And proof was what I needed. Not just for my own clarity, but because the game she had started was bigger than she realized. The respect contract had been a warning shot. I wasn't about to walk blind into the next volley, so I stopped relying on coincidence. I started leveraging resources. One Friday afternoon, I met Matt for coffee. A mutual friend, or had been. He and I had coached youth soccer together, shared beers after games, seen each other through more than one rough patch. His wife, Claire, was now one of the Empowerment Circle regulars. Over black coffee in the corner booth, I kept my tone casual. "You and Claire been busy lately," I said, watching his reaction. Matt chuckled. "Man, don't get me started. She's at that studio half the week now. They've got all these events, some weird coach guy running them." Coach. My ears pricked. "What kind of guy?" Matt shrugged. "One of those smooth types. Talks a lot about personal truth, breaking old patterns. Bit of a cult vibe if you ask me." I leaned in slightly. "Ever meet him?" "Yeah, Evan's something. Tall guy, leather bracelets, too many rings. Thinks he's a guru." There it was. Evan. I kept my expression neutral. You hear anything about after-hours events? Matt's gaze sharpened a little. Why are you asking? I smiled faintly. Call it a hunch. He hesitated. Then sighed. Look, man, between us, Claire mentioned your wife's been hanging around with him a lot. More than the group stuff. They've been spotted grabbing drinks, staying late at that studio. I didn't want to get in your business. You're not. I clapped his shoulder. Appreciate the honesty. The picture was sharpening. That night I took the next step. Using a personal contact in hospitality, an old college friend now managing reservations at one of the upscale restaurants downtown, I inquired discreetly. 2 days later, I had confirmation, a reservation for 2. Her name, paired with Evan Foster. Intimate table, Friday prior. The same weekend as her so-called healing retreat. I felt the cold knot in my chest tighten. Not long after, I reached out again, this time to a contact in hotel management. With careful wording and a professional favor called in, I obtained what I needed, confirmation of multiple weekend stays under her name at boutique hotels, 2 of them overlapping with retreat weekends. 1 booking showed 2 guests checked in. By now, I had a thin but undeniable thread: witness sightings, restaurant records, hotel stays. But what drove the final nail home were the financial records. Late one night, when she'd fallen asleep early, or pretended to, I sat in my home office and combed through our accounts line by line. Hidden amid regular charges were cash withdrawals, larger than usual, clustered around her so-called retreat weekends. Specialty boutique purchases. A sudden spike in rideshare payments, always late at night. This wasn't about modern marriage. It wasn't about progressive boundaries. It was an affair. And worse, one wrapped in a carefully constructed legal veil. I sat back, fingers steepled, staring at the growing file of evidence on my desk. Somewhere beneath the pain swelling in my chest, a colder voice whispered, "She's not just cheating. She's building a narrative." And the respect contract had been her opening gambit, setting legal groundwork to frame any questioning as abuse. If I reacted emotionally, I'd be playing right into it. So I didn't. I wouldn't. I'd sharpened my mind too long to fall for that. Instead, I began outlining my next moves, methodically, clinically. Proof would be gathered, duplicates stored safely, financial safeguards prepared, legal counsel quietly consulted. I looked down at the wedding photo on my desk, one I hadn't noticed in weeks. Us, years younger, laughing under a sun-drenched sky. That man had believed in forever. Now, he was preparing for war. By the time May turned warm, I no longer needed to guess. I knew. The man she was seeing, Evan Foster, wasn't just some background figure in her circle. He was the circle's head coach, the founder of the so-called Sovereign Empowerment Collective, a slick brand. He held workshops, podcasts, private retreats. His Instagram painted a picture of modern enlightenment, linen shirts, spiritual quotes, polished videos of women laughing, weeping, finding themselves beneath his gaze. Privately, he was something else entirely. Through Matt, who, as it turned out, was growing deeply suspicious of Claire's obsession with the group, I learned more. Rumors circulated. Evan had a reputation for deep work with certain clients, selective one-on-one sessions, weekend trips under the guise of mentorship. Multiple marriages in the circle had already fractured, some quietly, others publicly. Still, the outer shell held a bright, shining image of liberation. When I pressed discreetly through my contacts in the local business community, more cracks appeared. Evan had no formal certifications. His LLC had shifted names 3 times in 2 years. Legal documents showed a pending civil suit from a former client, quietly settled. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't some misguided fling. It was exploitative coaching, hidden beneath layers of jargon and new age marketing. The personal betrayal was one thing. But when I began hearing murmurs about financial targeting, how Evan coached women on financial sovereignty, urging them to carve out assets from their marriages, the professional alarm bells rang loud and clear. I deepened my precautions, quietly moved certain joint funds to protected accounts, engaged a discreet forensic accountant to prepare a review of our assets. No moves that could be framed as controlling, just preparation, documented and by the book. The emotional toll hit hardest in the small moments. A Saturday morning where she emerged glowing after a virtual group session, phone buzzing with messages from Evan. A dinner with friends where she sang his praises. oblivious to the sideways glances of those who suspected more. A lingering hug she gave me afterward, almost guilty, almost rehearsed, and then came the new push. One evening, as we sipped wine on the patio, she broached it, a new version of her respect contract. "I've been thinking," she began, voice light but too careful. "We should revisit the agreement, add some financial clarity, just for mutual safety, so we both feel empowered." The coded language was unmistakable. She wanted formal clauses separating certain assets, locking in protection for herself, and for Evan. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood by our bedroom window, the city lights a blur beyond the glass. The war had fully emerged. It wasn't just her hidden relationship. It was a coordinated move, emotional, legal, financial. And somewhere behind it, Evan's influence guided the pieces. I reviewed my notes, refining my timeline, cross-referenced dates of her outings with Evan's public events, compiled communications, printed key financial documents. Through discreet channels, I began vetting attorneys, ones experienced in cases involving manipulative partners and complex divorce strategies. And quietly, I prepared for the fact that some of our mutual friends, those drawn into the collective, might already be complicit. The stakes had risen, and so had my resolve. I would not be trapped. I would not be outplayed. Not in my marriage. Not in my home. And certainly not by a self-styled coach, preying on the woman I had once trusted with everything. The first draft came to me by accident, though looking back, it was likely arrogance that slipped her hand. Late one Tuesday, while she was on another overnight retreat, I sat working late in my home office. Her laptop, usually with her or locked away, had been left on the dining table, power light blinking softly. I hesitated for a long moment, then moved. No snooping. Just searching, methodically, precisely. She'd left her cloud storage logged in. In the Empowerment Circle folder, buried beneath workshop notes and PDF ebooks, sat a document titled simply, Personal Narrative Draft. My pulse thudded as I opened it. What I found wasn't some journaling exercise. It was a draft complaint, written in legal tone, broken into clear sections, documenting supposed emotional neglect, controlling behavior, financial intimidation, falsehood after falsehood, carefully couched in therapeutic jargon. And worse, scattered through the notes were suggestions clearly contributed by someone else. Lines like, as discussed with EF, and, per Evans coaching on legal preparation. The implications were sickening and galvanizing. This wasn't an affair spiraling out of control. It was a coordinated divorce strategy, one designed to cast me as an abuser, and her as a sovereign woman bravely escaping a toxic marriage. The respect contract? It hadn't been a misguided peace offering. It had been step one, laying groundwork to later claim that any questions I asked were evidence of control, that any protective financial moves were financial abuse. The hidden relationship was bad enough, the betrayal devastating. But this, the premeditated framing, turned the game into something else entirely. I saved everything, documented the digital trail, the metadata, backed up key files to secured cloud storage. By morning, I had contacted an attorney, one of the best in the region for complex, high-asset divorces and strategic defense. Through a trusted referral, we arranged an initial consult under complete confidentiality. His assessment was blunt. You're looking at a full-court press. Reputation attack. Abuse narrative. She's probably already got legal counsel whispering in her ear, or worse, feeding strategy through this coach. I nodded. I'm prepared. He steepled his fingers. Then here's what we do. You go first. You build the record. You lock down assets legally, transparently, not in secret. You prepare your own filing, with evidence of infidelity and false narrative preparation. You expose this coach as an influencing party, and you do it before she serves you. It was the clearest path forward. Painful, but necessary. I left his office with a new resolve. The line in my mind, no going back, had been crossed. The emotional weight hit hard that night. I came home to a perfectly normal evening, her back from her trip, cheerful, full of stories about deep emotional breakthroughs. She poured us wine, settled in beside me on the couch, head resting lightly on my shoulder. And all the while I knew about the draft complaint, the prep work with Evan, the staged narrative taking shape beneath our very roof. I almost couldn't breathe, but I smiled, kissed the top of her head, told her I was proud of her growth, because now, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. The next steps would move fast. Documentation finalized, protective financial notices filed, divorce papers prepared, strategy coordinated. And when the moment came, when the confrontation could no longer be avoided, I would be ready to strike with facts, with proof, with devastating calm. She thought she was writing the story. She had no idea how far behind she was already. The filing date was set. I moved first, as my attorney advised, and every step was precise, calculated. We locked down certain joint accounts with clear legal transparency, notifying her counsel as required. Moved my personal funds to secured, documented accounts. Initiated protective notices on the house title. At the same time, my attorney prepared the divorce filing, built on a foundation of evidence, documentation of the personal involvement, hotel receipts, restaurant records, financial discrepancies, copies of her draft false complaint, and a full report on Evan Foster's role. Timing was everything. We filed the morning of her planned next overnight retreat. By noon, the paperwork was served. The message came within the hour, a flood of texts from her, alternating between confusion and disbelief. Can we talk? Why would you do this? You're overreacting. I waited. By evening, she came home, face pale beneath her makeup, eyes darting. She tried for normalcy at first, setting her bag down, pouring a glass of wine, asking about my day in a voice too high, too bright. I didn't play along. I invited her into the study, where the packet sat waiting on the desk. She saw the files and froze. What is this? I met her gaze, calm, steady. Proof of the undisclosed relationship, of the false narrative you've been building with Evan Foster's help, of the planned character attack, everything documented. Her mouth opened, closed. For a moment, she looked truly stunned. Then the instinctive deflection began. This isn't what you think. Evan's just a mentor. That draft, it was an exercise, not a real complaint. I didn't move, didn't raise my voice. Hotel stays? Restaurant dates? Coaching sessions in boutique suites? Financial withdrawals for personal getaways? This was no exercise. Her face crumpled for a second, the mask slipping, before hardening again. You're twisting everything. You've always been controlling. This is exactly why I needed boundaries. I let the silence stretch, then leaned forward. Respect isn't a contract. And this house won't fund your false freedom. Her composure cracked. Tears welled, but whether from shame, fear, or calculation, I couldn't tell anymore. The conversation that followed was not a shouting match. I kept my voice low, steady. She tried denial, minimization, even soft pleading, but the facts stood. Every attempt was met with unshakable evidence. By the end, her words faltered. The public fallout began soon after. The filing was a matter of record. The proof of the inappropriate relationship, the influence of Evan Foster, and her documented manipulation, all submitted cleanly through legal channels. And then came the wider ripple. Other women from the collective began stepping forward, quietly at first, then with growing strength. Stories emerged, similar patterns of grooming, financial entanglement, orchestrated separations. Evan Foster's carefully curated image began to collapse. Our mutual friends split. Some had suspected, some had been complicit. A few reached out to apologize, their guilt visible in every word. Others vanished into silence, unwilling to face what they'd helped enable. As for the house, once a place of shared dreams, it became a symbol of the war. Per legal strategy, I retained control through the divorce proceedings, and when the time came, I made the choice myself, to sell. On my terms, no court battle, no drawn-out negotiation. Clean, documented, final. A sale contract signed, keys transferred. Freedom, in the simplest form. The day I packed the final box, the house stood hollow around me. Echoes of what we'd built, and what had crumbled. In the quiet, I paused by the doorway, one last glance back. She had written rules to bind me. I had written a sale contract, and freed us both. In the weeks after the sale, I thought the worst was done. The papers were final. The house no longer ours. I had moved, physically, legally, mentally, to higher ground. She seemed to think so too. Her tone in the few post-divorce emails was almost performative, forced civility, sprinkled with empowerment slogans. She spoke of fresh starts, of her ongoing work with the collective, of finding purpose again. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. But underneath the surface, not everything was settled. 2 months after my move, I received an unexpected call from my attorney. "Something's come up," he said. "You'll want to hear this." A former collective member, emboldened by the public collapse of Evan Foster's reputation, had come forward with financial documents. They showed something more insidious than just emotional manipulation: diverted funds. Several members had been urged, coached, really, to invest in their future through personal payments to private accounts connected to Evan and, in at least 2 cases, her. Under the guise of group donations, workshop prepayments, and empowerment partnerships, money had been siphoned, some from personal savings, some from marital accounts. One such deposit matched a transaction I'd flagged months earlier, quietly buried in our financial records under personal coaching fee. Now, it was evidence of potential civil fraud. Civil suits began forming. Regulatory inquiries soon followed. Consumer protection, financial misrepresentation. Her carefully crafted post-divorce image, the sovereign woman reinventing herself, shattered overnight. Professional partners she'd courted after the divorce cut ties fast. Sponsorship deals for her, empowerment coaching, dissolved. Former friends distanced themselves in public. In a bitter irony, the same network that had helped her build the groundwork to later claim that any questions I asked were signs of coercive behavior, that any protective financial moves were unfair or controlling. Through professional channels, I learned Evan was under formal investigation, and fleeing liability by attempting to dissolve entities and move operations out of state. As for her, I heard whispers of settlements demanded by former collective members, financial consequences far beyond the scope of our divorce. She reached out once, a carefully worded, emotionless message. "I hope you'll remain professional regarding what's happening. We've both moved on." I didn't respond, not because of bitterness, but because by then, I had nothing left to protect, or to say. The woman I had loved, the one I had nearly fought to save, had long vanished beneath masks, behind legal plays and false freedoms, and as her house of lies collapsed around her, I felt no triumph, just a cold, clear understanding: some traps are self-dug. Thank you for watching. Bye.